Recognize God in situations. Sure we do. Did you know that when you begin to recognize Him, He shows out? And that's the truth. Amen. God is always present. How come we sometimes feel like He's 10 million miles away? It's because we fail to recognize His presence. We're the ones that distance ourselves from God. Praise the Lord. But God is always with us. And reminds me of 3 guys out playing golf. There was Jesus, Moses, and an old man out playing golf. Moses gets up and tees off, hits the golf ball, and it goes up right for this little pond of water. And Moses holds up his golf club, and the water's part. And it bounces up and goes 2 feet in front of the hole. Jesus turns around and says, "Nice shot, Moses." So then Jesus gets up and he hits the ball, and it goes towards that same pond of water, lands on a lily pad out there. And Jesus walks in the water, chip shots it, goes up 1 foot in front of the hole, and Moses turns around and says, "Nice shot, Jesus." Then this old man gets up there, and he smacks the ball, and it rolls about 10 feet down the fairway. A squirrel comes running down out of the tree, grabs the ball, goes running down the middle of the fairway. An eagle swoops down, picks up the squirrel, carries him over the green. Eagle drops the squirrel, squirrel drops the ball, ball goes in the hole. Jesus turns around and says, "Nice shot, Dad." So many times we don't realize, just as you didn't realize maybe that was God in that particular scenario, but sometimes we don't realize God is present. God is always present. Everywhere you go. And as one song says, "Everywhere I be." It says Jesus is mine, but it means Jesus is present. Yes. Always present. Always near. Always ready to come to our rescue when we recognize Him. But sometimes we fail to recognize Him. And that's what I want to talk about today. Is your life headed for calamity? Or are you headed for blessing? Which one are you headed for? Now I want to tell you about a group of people. Brother Porter had ministered on this Wednesday night, but the Lord had so impressed me to continue with that thought. And if you weren't here Wednesday night, you missed a good message. Amen, as always. But I want us to turn to Genesis, the 11th chapter. The first verse. The Bible says, "And the whole earth was of one language and of one speech. And it came to pass, as they journeyed from the east, that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. And they said one to another, Go to, let us make brick, and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone, and slime had they for mortar. And they said, Go to, let us build us a city, and a tower whose top may reach into heaven, and let us make us a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth. The Lord came down to see the city and the tower, which the children of men builded. And the Lord said, Behold, the people is one, and they have all one language, and this they begin to do, and now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do. Go to, let us go down, and there confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. So the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of the earth, and they left off to build the city. Therefore is the name of it called Babel, because the Lord did there confound the language of all the earth. And from thence did the Lord scatter them abroad upon the face of the whole earth. Has God ever told you to do something, and you just found every reason in the world not to? Because the devil will come up with reasons for you. Mm-hmm. And you'll come up with reasons for you. Because every time God ever tells you to do something, it's usually a little outside your comfort zone. Mm-hmm. It's going to stretch you a little bit. But God had told them earlier, He had said, multiply and replenish the earth. And they decided that they were going to stay in one place and build a name for themselves. Too many times we're worried about what we're doing in the name of ourselves. I see preachers get caught up in that. It's all about building their ministry, their name, their church. Right? But God wants more than that. God says if you trust Him, you'll have a name. But He wants you to build His name. His church will be called by Him. That's what the Scripture says. But building for yourself will get you in trouble. Because usually we fail to recognize God. It wasn't that building a tower was so bad. It wasn't that building a city was so bad. But what they were building spiritually was a name for themselves. God doesn't care if you own a building. We get caught up in thinking that God cares that, have this or have that or have the other thing. God doesn't care what you have. But God does care in whose name that you do it. They were building a name for themselves. We're somebody. And of course we know that Psalms 127:1 says, except the Lord build the house, they that labor in vain. I'm reminded of Saul, who was the king of Israel. He was somebody. In fact, he was a head taller than anybody else in all of Israel. He was big. He was a warrior. He was the king of Israel. Had it all together. And it was all about him. He was building a name for himself. Yeah, I'm somebody. But all that Saul did and all that Saul built was for naught. It was in vain. Why do I say that? Because of his disobedience to God, he got stripped of his throne and his anointing. Because of his disobedience to God, his sons no longer went on the throne. It was passed to another family. And of course we know that was David. But because Saul was all about him, building his kingdom, building his name, building his legacy, wasn't about God. Nebuchadnezzar was the same way. Everybody knows who Nebuchadnezzar was, king of Babylon. He was one of the most powerful kings of his time. Built a golden image and told the people, if you got to bow down and worship this golden image. Guess who the image was of? Himself. You got to bow down and worship this golden image. When you hear the music. 3 guys said, we're not going to bow. We're not going to bow. Nebuchadnezzar's life was all about him. We find later in Nebuchadnezzar's life that his attitude led towards destruction. He wound up spending 7 years in a field eating like an animal. King of Israel. King of Babylon. He was somebody living like an animal in a field for 7 years. Because he chose to build his name rather than the name of God. I want to ask you this morning, are you headed for destruction or are you headed for blessing? It depends on whose name you're building in. If you're building it all about you, then you're headed for destruction. If your motivation is all about you, you're headed for destruction. I'm all about prosperity. I'm all about blessing. But if you're being motivated because of yourself, then you're building your house in vain. If you're being motivated by what God wants, then you're building your house on solid ground. Now the reason I say that is because Jesus said this. He said, my meat is to do the will of the Father which sent me. That which gives me sustenance. That which is important. That which gives me strength is to do the will of the Father which is sent in